Today on Websites Decoded, I'm joined by Amanda McGrath, Commercial Director here at Blend, to talk about the sorts of hidden and misunderstood costs that businesses can find themselves facing when they make CMS choices that are rooted in the needs of the moment as opposed to the needs of the long-term business. WordPress is the most common CMS on the market, so it's natural that a lot of the circumstances that we described today and a lot of the challenges that businesses face will be seen through the lens of WordPress CMS, WordPress implementation. But there are lots of ways that businesses can end up in this situation, and it's not how they get there that's important. It's what it means for them in terms of their opportunities, their growth, and their ability to run their business effectively. So we're going to talk today a little bit about what that looks like, share some examples of things we've seen and heard, and hopefully help you navigate this topic with a bit more success in the future. Amanda, thanks for coming on Websites Decoded.
Thank you for having me.
You're on the front line of conversations with our prospects, with our customers about their choices in terms of technology, in terms of partners, in terms of CMS. What is it that in those conversations that has led you to want to talk about this issue today and think really clearly about it?
Well, I suppose I've been talking about this to lots of different people, different WordPress implementations that people have had in the past or are thinking about now. They're considering implementing other CMSs. They're usually evolving. They're usually thinking about WordPress in the mix as well, ultimately, because it is the dominant platform. But it brings me back. Every time I have these conversations, it brings me back to my own history of working in an in-house WordPress environment. I worked in a situation where we had, I think, somewhere between 8 and 12 WordPress websites that we were looking after, in addition to a number on proprietary CMSs. And the goal of WordPress that was being brought in was that it would move us away from these proprietary environments and mean that we were better able to manage our sites effectively ourselves. And I think that promise is something that still holds true in the market. People think that that is what they get when they move on to WordPress. But ultimately, what I'm hearing from people I'm talking to is it really isn't always the case.
Mm-hmm.
And I very recently had a conversation that I came out of both really interested and enjoying the conversation with the people who were talking about this project, and so frustrated for them, for the situation that they had ended up in, because not only were they having to use in-house resource to manage some of the site, they had an agency they were completely tied into as well. And between just those resources, not taking into account the time spent by the marketers on the call with me, they were spending nearly £100,000 a year just keeping their site on, launching new pages. But their whole process was geared around moving things in this very slow way, big launches, which I think a lot of people want to move away from in terms of how they manage their site these days. Is actually, when you've got a new page, you just want to get it out there. You don't want to have to think about it being this big body of work and pushing something out live. So there's just a lot of pain that these people were talking to me about, and it echoed not only with other conversations that I've had of every time I want to make a change I have to go back to the developer, but my own experience essentially of working in exactly this sort of environment and how painful it could be, not just to make changes and get things live, but even to do things like keep the lights of the site on.
Yep.
Oh, this plugin has updated, I need to make sure that oh no, it's broken this bit on the homepage and these 3 pages. I remember being in situations where we would say, oh, today we need to update these 3 plugins, let's say. Oh no, that's broken this. Well, we have to now go back and figure out which one has made the break, or maybe it's a combination of the things together that has caused this. So there's a lot of pain, I think, out there that people experience. I've felt it. I'm hearing it all the time. I think it's still a big issue.
I think it will be a surprise, or it should be a surprise to a lot of people to hear that this is still an issue, and it's an issue that we've all experienced like a decade or more ago, and yet it remains. And I don't think that's widely discussed or understood. It's 2025 and technology is amazing and technology is everywhere, and AI is, disrupting everything. And yet still the problems that many of us have experienced in decades past are still a factor. And what you've described, there is no way on earth that businesses are considering those sorts of things, those sorts of consequences when they're making the investment choices and decisions at the point of adoption of these platforms, right? So WordPress in particular is considered to be widespread, well known, quick and easy to buy, cheap to operate, hosting choices are abundant, most of them are managed, and so on. And so it would appear that paints a picture of a very easy life, right? Where you can get low cost resource to do whatever needs to be done on a low cost CMS that's hosted on low cost infrastructure and just works. But nearly everybody we speak to has some version of the problems you've described where they're incurring huge costs, some of them visible, some of them hidden, to keep that platform working, to move that platform forward, to evolve their website on that platform. And it's widespread. And nearly everyone we talk to who approaches us, obviously with some interest in HubSpot as a CMS, which I call a CMS as a service, effectively, and share stories of these sorts of challenges. It's really, really common.
Yeah, it is so common. And I have calls day in, day out where people are facing these exact challenges of, I need to edit this and I can't change my navigation. I try to fix this thing and it breaks something else. And I don't necessarily personally either have the capabilities to fix it or a resource that I want to invest in getting to fix it. The agency relationships that are set up where people are very tied in can become very painful. And when everything is sort of bound up in that, I need to pay X to get Y and I have no control over how much that costs whatsoever, things can become very fraught. Even relationships that started out really well can break down ultimately.
This podcast is brought to you by Blend, the HubSpot website agency. Your website is your most valuable marketing asset, and so it's crucial that you get it right. We're the specialist HubSpot website agency helping businesses create effective, scalable websites that drive real results. See examples of our work and the impact we've delivered for businesses just like yours at blendb2b.com. You've made me realize as well that, like, this is it's an important conversation and probably one that rarely happens, right? Businesses don't typically compare notes on what it's costing them to, like, course correct for the choices that have been made, right? So if a business is spending 10K a month, 30K a month, in some cases 100K a month to maintain a site that was procured on the basis of, widespread understanding, low cost resource availability, like, that's potentially a little bit embarrassing, right? But businesses need to confront embarrassing conversations. And if they were to compare notes with one another and realize how many of them are in the same situation, or before making the decision, understand that that's where they might end up, some could avoid those huge costs that add nothing to the business, really. They don't generate anything for you if it's just keeping the lights on, keeping the site running, patching vulnerabilities, and publishing updates, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about a marketing leader having to instruct the in-house developer, yes, we need to get that plugin updated, or the reverse, hearing that needs to happen, and we might have some downtime, and then planning for, when is that going to happen? And that's all time away from actual strategic activities. Actually thinking about what can we add to our content, what can we do to get to more of our audience ultimately. Every time you have to fix the homepage or deal with a security issue that's come in as a result of an update, that is time taken away from investing the effort and the time and the money in moving the business forward. It is just business as usual being held together in a very flimsy way, unfortunately. One thing you mentioned about how can business owners or business leaders compare notes? It's very, very hard for them to assess those costs. I had someone ask me, how much will we save? I'm like, how much are you spending on those resources? How much time is that taking the other members of your team? How much do you spend on those people? Unfortunately, that probably is something that only you can assess. But those are probably the major cost areas. What are you having to spend on any agency relationships, on any specialist roles for maintaining the site? What are you spending in terms of time from your other team members? And what's an average cost to you as the organization for those team members per hour? If they're spending 3 hours a week, that stacks up really, that can stack up really quickly, essentially. That total cost of ownership piece is probably one of the most important things that businesses can do when thinking about the future of their site, because that promise that the platform is free, it's free if you invest in a whole infrastructure around it. It's free if you build your team around it or your resources around it. That's not free. That really isn't.
There may be something. I'm starting to sense that if you aim to lower the cost at the outset of a journey like this, then you essentially maximize your cost later, right? Which is to say that if your focus is on, making cost savings, constraining budget when you get started on a project like this, choosing platforms, choosing, solutions, then it may not pay off in the long term. I think HubSpot is a fairly unique proposition in terms of CMSs, in terms of how much value it includes for what I think is relatively a very attractive license fee. But of course, you can go further and say, well, what would be the cost of monitoring your site, detecting anomalies and attacks and preventing DDoS, which happens less and less these days in terms of that's dealt with. But the security, the maintenance, the proactiveness, all of these things, most businesses can't even begin to do, and would cost them significant amounts on top of everything we've talked about were they to try. Yeah. And so I think I tend to divide CMSs into like CMS as a service, where more of your requirements for your business are supplied by the vendor than by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I guess legacy, I don't know what that would be called, software plus infrastructure plus something else, but like where you're taking a CMS which might be proprietary or open source or low cost, but you're having to bolt around it all of these solutions one way or another. And when you do total up all of those costs and expenses, usually there's a very clear leader, like you say, total cost of ownership being the true measure of the decisions you make in this area.
I think that's it. And that's where, the proposition of WordPress, when people are comparing just the CMSs, they look and they go, wow, one is more expensive than the other.
Yeah.
But that's an upfront cost, and that's a transparent cost. And ultimately, what people need to do more of, I think, is to look beneath the surface of the proposition for their website. It's not just a question of looking at, whoever's building your site and designing it, how does that look? Is it going to look good enough? Is the strategy behind it good enough? Those are really important components, but people need to spend more time assessing whether what they're going to get inside the content management system is going to be easy for the team that they have to use, mm-hmm. or if it is going to tie them in to complex relationships, either with internal team members or with their, with agencies, let's say. So more transparency and more looking under the hood at the not sexy bits.
Yeah.
When it comes to assessing the people, I have lots of different conversations where people say, oh yes, the quality of the work is just as good. Is it? When you look at what is being produced for you to use, mm-hmm. is what you're being given as flexible, as easy to edit? You really need to double check that, because that is actually what you're going to live with the most as the people who need to do the marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, partners and resources play a role there, right? Mm-hmm. We've both said before, any CMS can be implemented poorly or well.
Yes.
But that is a factor which complicates this discussion somewhat, because it's no longer solely about software or infrastructure. But it is vitally important that your CMS is implemented in a way that supports your business objectives, empowers your team. And for whatever reason, on average, we see that businesses that have made decisions that lead them to open source, lower cost, rarely find themselves in a good position in that way, and we certainly take, we pay a huge amount of attention to what that product looks like in terms of the editor's experience, because that's a big determining factor. In theory, you can take any CMS and you can implement it in a way that helps you achieve your business goals. But I maintain that, in my opinion, WordPress, for example, is a fantastic CMS. They've done incredible things, and it's the perfect solution in some situations. But as businesses mature, I typically see it providing less and less of what they need in order to achieve their goals and succeed. And in my experience, I've seen it better results at empowering those marketing teams, creating that editability, creating that scalability on HubSpot as a platform than I have on WordPress as a platform. Is there anything else within the context of your partners matter, in terms of the setup, in terms of any CMS can be set up well or poorly? Is there anything else people need to consider in terms of, is that a reason, is that a justification for pursuing, a wide range of solutions, or are there other factors that should encourage people to look in a certain direction?
I think, obviously, if you are already in a situation where, as an organization, you've got some sort of in-house developer, that is going to play a part in your decision making. It's a hard decision to make, to move away from a platform that your developer is good at. What I would say, and we've definitely talked about this before, but it's very hard for a single developer in an organization to be assessed for how good their work is. Even if they go out and they read really widely and they look at other people's examples, if they are the only technical lead in their organization for that sort of work, they are always going to be, there's always the risk that they do something and they leave, something happens. That key man risk is absolutely there, but also in flight, how do you critique the quality of their work if you do not have that experience yourself? So I do understand where businesses have that existing resource. They want to, they want to maintain that. They've built up relationships and so on. But really assessing, are you ever going to have enough sites as an organization to have more than one person? If so, yes, a team could develop.
Makes sense.
It would make sense for you. But if you are a single brand, or even, I would say, any single brand, surely what you're creating doesn't need enough things that are new to warrant a full-time resource of any specific kind these days, because there's so much you can do in terms of scale. If you're multi-brand, perhaps, but it's about your business strategy. That's when it all kind of starts to roll up from. I think that's probably true of a lot of these considerations. When you're planning your site, you need to think about how much flexibility it's going to have with the way that your business is going. Do you grow by acquisition? Are you going to be bringing in new products? What's happening that will change your navigation? Also, how will it be looked after? Is there going to be enough work for full-time team members? Ultimately, I don't think many organizations really should be thinking, how am I going to create a role that is one person's role forever in this business, where there's no one else in it who can actually say whether that person is doing the best job they could, can compare their work to anyone else's.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a single point of failure risk.
Yeah. Interesting point. So if businesses, if anyone listening is like pre that point, they have an opportunity to save themselves that mistake, that cost, and and take a smarter route, which is ultimately about making better investments in terms of time and money. One of my observations about CMSs lately, modern CMSs, is that the message they give, typically their sort of like entry-level customer, the people they want to onboard first, is that you don't need a developer to do this sort of stuff. And I think that gets misconstrued as, if you use this CMS, you'll never need a developer. And I think that's untrue. I think that actually there will always be times, and you should want to need a developer from time to time, but it's not a good investment to put yourself into a situation where you necessitate having a developer on staff just to do basic editing work, because that's what CMSs should offer you. So that there's a really interesting like resourcing like challenge there that can be optimized.
That's exactly it. I think with WordPress, you have to accept that there is some level of ongoing developer support needed to keep the site running. In many other CMSs that are less open source, HubSpot being one of them, that is not a requirement in the same way. When you take on that sort of platform, when you go back to developers, it is for that point if we want to add something new, innovative, we want to move things forward. That's fantastic. And that's a really, sensible investment. And so the routes that you can take as an organization, the focus on what the cost of those routes is very different. Yes, with an agency, you will invest more upfront, but you will not spend, if you've got the right setup, as much ongoing, unless you choose to, unless you look at that team of people and think, actually, you can really help me take this website to the next level.
Right.
You can be part of my strategy and help me dovetail into parts of my business where I'm never going to have the need for a full-time resource. So yes, I can add all of that in and I've got that extension of my capabilities. That's very different from saying I need to go back every time I want to change something on the navigation. Oh, we spelt it wrong last time.
Yep.
The product name's updated.
Yep.
Who wants to be going back to their agency for that? No one.
No one. And no one should. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. We've talked about the cost of these choices, the consequences, and now we're talking more about the opportunity, because with every cost means we forego an opportunity. If people are able to save themselves these costs, what are the opportunities that they are able to therefore take advantage of? And I think about customers we've helped onto the HubSpot platform, and I think about the ones that have put proper heat mapping on their website, understood their UX, and made significant improvements to the customer journey by changing navigation, by changing conversion points and offers and the customer journey and so on. What do you see as being the opportunity that's unleashed, that's unlocked, if people are able to understand, identify and mitigate these unnecessary costs?
I certainly think the ones that you point to are key ones. Can they evaluate the site that they've got and make improvements to it to make it unlock better results? But also, there's a huge opportunity in not just changing what you've got, but planning for the future and being able to execute on bigger, bolder moves, essentially. Not just like the fine tuning, which we know has such great impact, but that big campaign that you were never going to get to in a situation where you spent even half a day, 2 days a month on being really stressed out that part of the site was down and haranguing your developer to fix it, while you've got someone in your ear from sales saying, "Why's the site going down? I've got a call with a prospect."
Yeah, terrifying.
Those are really stressful situations, and stress does not breed creativity. It does not help people be strategic. It puts people into adrenaline and fight or flight mode, right?
Yeah.
So actually, there's the direct cost of the time. There's the indirect cost in terms of how you as a team will enjoy your work. And enjoyment brings out the best in people. They get to do better and more imaginative things. And we all know that when we put more of ourselves into what we're putting out there, it is more authentic, it is more valuable. That's where our effort and our energy needs to go, not being absorbed in nasty, difficult situations, essentially.
Yeah.
Just take the pain out. You'll all have a better time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you've brought me around to a point I was just thinking about, which is to say, if we're going to give advice to people about how to make, good investments and be sort of impartial about it, like one of them is, if you're in this situation now, don't repeat the same mistakes, right? Which is, if you're incurring those costs, those extreme total cost of ownership challenges that, as a result of a certain setup, don't go to market when you want to get a fresh site and simply repeat that set of mistakes on the basis that something is free or low cost or cheap and easy to get, right? Any other things that you think people need to think about when it comes to investment decisions that will help steer them well?
Yeah, do try and genuinely assess what it costs you to run your current implementation in time, in resource that you pay for directly and indirectly. Really try and get a full picture, because when you add it up, saying I spend £100,000 a year right now, so spending 40-50 to get this fixed, as opposed to going and spending 7-8 on a new site that will repeat the same problems, That's very different.
Mm.
That's where you can really game change, I think, as an organization, not falling into the same traps. I think the other one would probably be that point that we made earlier of when you're looking for a provider, whoever it is, in-house, agency, don't just look at the visuals, don't just look at what the front ends of their site look like, look underneath, because any CMS can be implemented badly and be hard to use. Have a video demo, ask to see something in action, get confidence that the way you want to work is supported by what will be delivered to you.
Yeah.
That's so important, because when you're in a project, it's far too late to change course there.
Nearly every modern CMS offers like drag and drop editing, right? But there's actually a huge amount of variance in terms of how that's implemented. And unless you see what your potential partners can offer, you may get a very different solution to the one you anticipate or expect. And even then, I don't believe that it's necessarily optimized for the users within the business. And I think that's another message that CMS vendors like give to their sort of entry level customer that everybody hears, which is drag and drop is the solution to all problems. The reality is it isn't. I also think that there's an important consideration that businesses need to make as they change sort of scale, and as a website project comes along which reflects them having moved from one scale to another, which is to really think carefully and clearly about all of their requirements. It's quite common to see CMSs chosen not in a rush, but based on name and what's perceived about them, as opposed to an actual like systematic identification of what do we need our website to do, offer and guarantee and ensure for our customers and our visitors, and of the solutions we're considering, which do they offer and which do they not, which is included in the cost and managed and maintained and procured for me, and which one will I have to find, configure, support, maintain ourselves. And that process is incredibly enlightening, I think, and really shines a very clear view on which of the CMSs on the market are compelling given what a maturing, growing business requires. And that can help people avoid a lot of future pitfalls, I think, when they realize that actually something they didn't put on the RFP or on the the requirements list was key. And having that in from the get-go is really, really powerful, really, really helpful. Any final points? Anything we haven't covered that you wanted to share?
One thing's just come to mind, which is a conversation you and I have been both part of recently. I think for me more than once, where self-hosting as a requirement in that procurement process for a CMS was put really high on the list. Why?
I mean, that's
why don't businesses ask themselves why?
Yes, if that's a requirement, I think that's largely an outdated requirement. It's probably simply a carryover from other lines of business, from other things that you do as a company that lead you to believe that either because our website currently is self-hosted, our new one should be, because we have extensive server resources that we utilize for other lines of our business, we may as well utilize them for our website. Could be lots of reasons, and yes, we see it frequently, you're right. But I think in the case of your go-to-market website, it's actually, rarely, if ever, the smart choice, given what you need to produce an effective website that gets your message to your market and converts it into pipeline. Self-hosting isn't going to help you achieve that in the majority of cases.
Absolutely, and I think we've had the feedback of, we have a highly technical team here, they're more than capable of doing that. And the question I think we would always put to them is that the best use of that capability's time, when it could just be completely out of their hands and just be running itself? The idea that because you have a certain kind of resource, you should have total ownership of everything is a bit of a mistake in many cases, especially when it blurs the lines of responsibility for a project between marketing and sales, who should ultimately be driving the success of your demand generation, website being such a key component of that, perhaps with some other people in the mix from, your careers side and whatever other kinds of audience you have for your site. But the idea that just because it is tech, your IT team should be able to put their hands all over it and look inside it isn't necessarily true. in many cases.
Yeah, yeah. I think when you look at it through the lens of pure infrastructure provisioning and management, it can like look quite attractive, but there's so much more to the website of a business than that it just doesn't make sense to try to orchestrate all of that internally. And security can be a very real concern, but that is a concern that should be levied at the providers, right? At the vendors of the CMS and the infrastructure and the partners that you use, and they should be able to meet your requirements there. And there are ones that can. We're an ISO 27001 certified agency. Our preferred CMS platform, HubSpot, meets pretty much every standard you can throw at it, and so we can meet the needs of even the most stringent, the most critical businesses. That shouldn't be a reason to suffer the problems that come with self-hosting and the litany of things that you've then got to figure out for yourselves and monitor and maintain and update and patch over the rest of the lifetime of that site.
Yeah,
that's definitely a good point. Okay, let's wrap it up there. I think that's a good place to end. Thanks for listening. If you're enjoying Websites Decoded, do please give us a like or a follow or a subscribe on any of the platforms where you see this. And thank you very much. See you again next time.
Thanks,
Amanda.